Dream of the Red Chamber, Chapter 87.
You ever have one of those days where the wind is just howling outside and you reach into the back of your closet looking for a warm coat and you accidentally pull out a hidden box of your ex's stuff?
Oh man, that is the worst feeling.
Right. And then, as if the universe hasn't piled on enough, your friend literally hallucinates from sheer stress.
Yeah, that is a very specific, very bad day.
Chapter 87 of the classic novel Dream of the Red Chamber. That is exactly the kind of day we found ourselves looking at.
It really is, yeah.
The profound psychological unraveling of characters who are trapped, just living in this high society fishbowl. We're looking at how suppressed emotions, incredibly rigid social structures, and this creeping sense of existential dread manifest in these really subtle, deeply unsettling ways.
Right, because the vibes are incredibly off in this section.
Totally off. We're talking about the scent of a phantom flower, a terrifyingly aggressive game of Go, a snapped zither string, and eventually a full-blown supernatural and psychological breakdown.
It's just a masterclass in atmospheric tension, honestly, and psychological realism, too.
Yeah.
The texts give us a microscope into a world where every small detail is practically screaming that something terrible is about to happen.
It's suffocating.
It is. But to truly understand the pressure cooker these characters are in, we need to establish the baseline of the core cast. We have to know who's navigating this tension.
Right, let's set the stage for the listener.
So first we have Dayu. She is a melancholy, orphaned poet living under the roof of her extended aristocratic family.
And she's deeply sensitive, right?
Oh, incredibly sensitive. She's chronically ill and she possesses this devastatingly sharp intellect. Then we have Bao Chai, her peer.
Who is kind of the opposite in a lot of ways.
Exactly. Bao Chai is the inverse.
Yeah.
She's the burdened, pragmatic, perfectly composed manager of her own chaotic family unit.
She holds it all together.
She tries to, yeah. And then we also have Miao Yu, who is this enigmatic, seemingly detached nun living in the family's sprawling garden.
Right, the one who supposedly doesn't care about anything mortal.
Supposedly.
Yeah.
And finally, Shi Chun, a younger cousin who basically observes everyone else's drama with this chilling, detached coldness.
She is terrifying, but we'll get to her. So the inciting incident for the psychological domino effect in these sources kicks off with what I can only describe as the 18th century equivalent of a 3 a.m. text from a frenemy.
That is the perfect way to describe it.
Right, because we are looking at a letter that Dayu receives from Bao Chai. Now, living in the same massive compound, the fact that Bao Chai is sending a formal letter rather than just walking over and visiting, that speaks volumes.
It really highlights the physical and emotional isolation they are experiencing.
Exactly. And this isn't just a casual note. Bao Chai writes about a tragic disaster hitting her family. She uses the specific phrase, dense rain and harsh winds.
Which is such a heavy metaphor.
It is. She outlines the exhausting burden of an aging mother, non-stop vicious rumors swirling around them, and her brother's ongoing legal and social troubles.
Yeah, Bao Chai is usually the stoic rock of her family.
Right.
But here, she is laying her complete desperation bare. That vulnerability is really the crux of the communication.
It's like she just can't hold it in anymore.
Exactly. But Chai doesn't just list her grievances. She explicitly recalls a past memory to bridge the emotional gap between them.
Oh, the poetry club.
Yes. She brings up an autumn poetry club they previously held, and she quotes a line of poetry that Dayu herself once wrote.
Which was, who will the lonely proud one hide with? Why do identical flowers bloom late?
Right, and then Bao Chai uses the metaphor of hidden fish and birds to describe the two of them. She's expressing this incredibly deep loneliness and a desperate search for a true soulmate.
Or at least someone who understands the specific frequency of her misery.
Yeah, precisely.
The relatable irony here is just palpable for you reading this. It is like getting a deeply emotional existential message from a rival coworker where you both suddenly realize you are being crushed by the exact same corporate machine.
That's a great analogy.
Because these two are presented as differing personalities. I mean, Bao Chai is the ultimate pragmatist who plays by the rules, while Dayu is the romantic who constantly pushes against them.
But trauma and profound isolation bridge that gap instantly.
Instantly. Dayu reacts with immediate sympathy. She notes a phrase that translates roughly to, the wise appreciate the wise. It makes me wonder about the mechanics of that bond. Like, why does shared trauma bypass years of rivalry so effectively in a high-pressure environment?
Well, because trauma bonding in this specific context strips away the performative roles they are forced to play.
Okay, right.
Think about it. Bao Chai spends her life managing a chaotic family. dealing with a notoriously difficult sister-in-law, and constantly performing the role of the perfect, unbothered daughter.
It must be exhausting.
It's entirely exhausting. So when the facade cracks under the immense pressure of her brother's scandals, she realizes Dayu is the only other person in that massive household who fundamentally understands her.
Because they're both trapped.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They understand what it means to be an extraordinarily intelligent woman trapped in a gilded cage. Neither of them has any true agency over their own future.
So Baochai using Dayu's own poetry to reach out is...
It's a highly sophisticated way of saying, I see the architecture of your sorrow, and I am currently living inside it.
Oh, wow, I'm currently living inside it. That is heavy. And the imagery Baochai uses in her appended poems just cements this suffocating atmosphere.
It really does.
She writes about the cold autumn wind, the dry frost on the leaves, the deep pools where fish hide. And she asks the vast heavens who could possibly know her eternal sorrow.
It sets an incredibly heavy tone of impending doom for the reader.
Yeah, because when the strongest person you know admits they are drowning, it completely destabilizes your own reality. Baochai's absence in the household is suddenly deeply physically felt by Dayu.
And that absence creates a vacuum. And, nature abhors a vacuum.
Right, someone has to fill it.
So almost immediately after Dayu reads this heartbreaking letter, her other cousins drop by for a visit. Tanchen, Xiangyin, Li Wen, and Li Qi.
Just a whole crowd suddenly in a room.
Exactly. And because Baochai isn't there, the conversation naturally gravitates toward her absence. They note how swamped she is dealing with her family's endless crises.
But what I love about this scene is how the narrative brilliance here is how the external environment suddenly intrudes to mirror Dayu's internal destabilization.
The phantom scent.
Yes, the phantom scent. They were all sitting together, the conversation is already tinged with this melancholy over Baochai, and suddenly there is a sharp gust of wind. It blows a flurry of dead autumn leaves against the paper windows. And carrying on that wind is a strange, highly distinct fragrance.
Right, and Dayu smells it and immediately identifies it as osmanthus or sweet cassia.
But Tanchen, who is ever the rationalist, immediately shuts this down.
She does. She points out the geographical and temporal reality. She's like, look, we are in the north. It is the 9th lunar month.
It's way too late.
Right. It is far too late in the year and far too cold for cassia to be blooming anywhere near them.
Then Xiangyun provides the crucial counterpoint.
Yeah, she notes that down in the south, late cassia is blooming perfectly right at that exact moment.
And this seemingly trivial botanical debate sparks this profound philosophical realization in Dayu.
It's a huge turning point for her in this chapter.
She coins the phrase, people are earth-walking immortals.
Right.
And it's a concept that implies destiny completely dictates where you end up. Just like the phantom scent of a southern flower finding its way to a northern window, human beings are displaced by currents entirely out of their control.
It's such a beautiful phrase, earth-walking immortal.
It sounds so magical, doesn't it? But underneath the poetry, she is talking about a terrifying lack of autonomy. You are just wandering the earth, placed wherever fate, or in her case, the patriarchal family structure, drops you.
And this phantom scent triggers a massive, visceral wave of homesickness for her.
Oh, she spirals.
She really does. She starts mentally mapping the South. She pictures the spring flowers, the autumn moons, the famous 24 bridges of Yangtze.
She's basically scrolling through her mental camera roll of a life she can't have.
Yeah, she thinks of the historical ruins of the 6 dynasties, the red apricots and the green curtains hanging from the taverns. She thinks about how, if her parents were still alive, she would be there.
She wouldn't be trapped.
Right. She would be living freely with her own household, able to speak her mind without the constant paralyzing fear of offending someone.
Because the contrast she draws between that imagined, vibrant autonomy in the South and her current reality in the North is just devastating.
It really is. She describes living under someone else's roof.
Which is technically true, even though she's family.
Yes. Even though she receives luxurious care from her extended family, the psychological toll is immense. She notes that she has to be painstakingly careful of every single word she speaks and every action she takes.
She is existing in a state of permanent hypervigilance.
Exactly. She even quotes the deposed emperor and poet Li Huzu, stating she is washing my face with tears all day.
Wow.
Yeah, she explicitly compares her situation in her grandmother's house to the grief of an exiled monarch.
That is a massive comparison. And we see the physical manifestation of that hypervigilance in the very next scene.
The dinner scene.
Yes. The sources you provided go into staggering detail about Dayu's dinner time. We aren't just told she eats.
No, not at all.
We are given the exact inventory of a highly customized, delicate meal. There is a ham and cabbage soup, but it's specifically augmented with tiny dried shrimp, bamboo shoots, and seaweed. There is glutinous rice porridge and a side of 5-spice kohlrabi dressed perfectly with sesame oil and vinegar.
And to really understand the weight of that meal, you have to look at the logistics of it.
Right, because it's not just takeout.
No, in an 18th century northern aristocratic household, sourcing fresh bamboo shoots and seaweed is a massive undertaking.
Oh, because they're in the north.
Exactly. These are luxury ingredients that require complex supply chains.
Wow.
Furthermore, these dishes aren't coming from the main bustling family kitchen where meals are made in bulk. They are being prepared privately.
Just for her.
Just for her. The text specifically names the staff, Lu Saozi and a girl named Wu, who are tasked with supervising this bespoke menu. They're catering entirely to her delicate constitution and chronic illness.
But instead of being comforted by this incredible level of care, Dayu looks at the food and is utterly consumed by guilt.
It's so sad.
She realizes the immense logistical effort, the coordination, and the sheer human labor it took from all these servants just to put this specific soup in front of her.
Right, she sees the hidden cost of it.
She feels like a massive, unjustifiable burden. Consequently, she eats almost nothing. She manages half a bowl of porridge and literally 2 sips of the soup before having the maids take the entire feast away.
And this brings us to the core of Dayu's psychological suffering. The food becomes a physical representation of her social debt.
Ooh, social debt. Tell me more about that.
Well, because she is an orphan living on the charity of her extended family, every special favor, every rare bamboo shoot feels like a mounting ledger of debt.
In a currency she has absolutely no way to repay.
Exactly.
But let's look at the pushback she gets from her own maid, Zihuan. Because Zihuan sees this guilt and explicitly tells Dayu her logic is flawed.
Zihuan is very pragmatic.
Very. Zihuan points out, you are the matriarch's own granddaughter. You are her absolute favorite.
Right. People in this house would kill for the chance to curry favor with you.
Yes. No one in that kitchen is complaining about making you soup. Zihuan is looking at the raw political reality of the household.
Where proximity to the matriarch's favor is the ultimate power.
Exactly. So for you looking at this, is Dayu's imposter syndrome justified, or is she manufacturing her own misery despite having the highest level of protection available in this society?
Well, Zihuan is analyzing the situation tactically, and she is correct for the present moment. Dayu does hold immense soft power because of the matriarch's love.
Right now she's safe.
But Dayu is operating on a much deeper existential timeline. The matriarch is elderly. When she eventually dies, that protective umbrella vanishes instantly.
She's exposed.
Completely.
Yeah.
Dayu has no parents to fall back on, no brother to advocate for her, and no independent wealth.
So it all comes back to the phantom scent.
Yes. The phantom scent of the southern cassia reminded her that she doesn't organically belong in this northern ecosystem. She's a transplanted flower.
Wow.
So as Zihuan sees political advantage, Dayu sees a precarious, temporary illusion of safety.
That makes the anxiety completely rational. I mean, she is living on borrowed time and borrowed affection.
Exactly.
And this melancholic spiral over feeling like a displaced burden perfectly primes her for the next sequence, which is essentially an emotional ambush hidden inside her own bedroom.
It's brutal. And the transition from emotional coldness to physical coldness is seamless here.
Yeah.
The wind is howling outside, the temperature drops, and Dayu, shivering, asks her maid, Swayan, to fetch a warm cloak from the winter clothes that have just been aired out.
This is where the universe just piles on. She's shivering, she just wants a coat to get warm, and instead, Swain brings out the bundle of clothes, and inside is a little silk packet. It was accidentally packed away by Zihuan to keep it safe. Dayu opens it, and it is a literal time capsule of trauma.
It really is.
From her deeply complicated, intensely passionate, and currently fractured relationship with her cousin Bayu.
And the catalog of items inside that soap packet is like a forensic record of a volatile romance.
Oh, do tell, what's in the packet?
Well, there are Bayu's old handkerchiefs, which bear poems Dayu wrote in her own tears.
Oh, wow.
There is a scent purse that has been literally cut to pieces with scissors.
Just shredded.
Yes. There are broken fan cases and the severed castles from Bayu's famous jade amulet.
It is a pile of shredded emotional wreckage.
Completely.
The text you sent highlights this beautifully, noting, a heartbroken person meets a heartbreaking thing, new tear stains among old ones.
It's so poetic. but so painful.
And Z1 walks in, realizes the colossal mistake she made in packing that packet with the everyday clothes, and desperately tries to do damage control.
Of course she does.
She attempts to rewrite the history of the object. She's like, oh, don't look at those. Those are just relics of when you and Bayou were kids, temporarily getting along, temporarily getting angry. It was all just childish squabbles.
But Z1's attempt to sanitize the past only sharpens the pain.
Because you can't just pretend it didn't happen.
No, because physical objects store emotional data with perfect fidelity.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
The fact that these items are cut up and broken forces Dayu to confront the extreme volatility of her relationship with Bayou.
They didn't just drift apart, right?
Right. They had explosive, agonizing misunderstandings that resulted in the literal physical destruction of the tokens of their affection.
To see all of those broken items gathered together in one place is to look at the accumulated collateral damage of her own heart.
It's overwhelming for her.
So, sitting in the cold, surrounded by the physical evidence of her broken relationship, feeling like a burden to her family, and mourning the fact that she is an earth-walking immortal far from home, Dayu turns to the only outlet she has left.
Her art.
Right. She decides to sublimate all this raw, agonizing grief into music. She pulls out her short zither, the kin. She sits down in the middle of the night, meticulously tunes the silk strings, and decides to compose.
And what she does here is brilliant.
She takes the 4 stanzas of poetry that Baochai sent her in that desperately sad letter, and she pairs them to 2 classic ancient kin melodies called Yilan and Sixian.
And to appreciate the depth of what she is doing, you really have to understand the melodies she chose.
Okay, break that down for us. What are those melodies?
So Yilin translates to concealed orchid. It's a melody traditionally associated with Confucius.
Oh, okay.
It laments that true virtue and beauty are often hidden in the wild, completely unappreciated by the world.
Which fits her perfectly.
Exactly. And Sixian translates to thinking of the worthy, which is a melody of longing for true understanding and companionship.
Wow.
So by taking Baochai's words of trauma and weaving them into these specific ancient melodies, Dayu is performing an act of profound, agonizing alchemy.
Alchemy is the perfect word.
She is translating her friend's isolation and her own romantic devastation into a complex mathematical musical arrangement.
It is a beautiful coping mechanism, but it requires an immense expenditure of emotional and spiritual energy.
Energy that Dayu, having eaten only 2 sips of soup, simply does not have.
Right. She is physically starving. And while Dayu is literally bleeding her soul into these strings in the dark, the narrative violently shifts focus.
It does.
To the object of her past affection, Bayou, who is having a profoundly weird and entirely contrasting day.
The juxtaposition is jarring by design.
Yeah.
While Dayu is weeping over severed tassels, Bayou essentially gets a snow day.
A snow day.
Well, the schoolmaster is occupied, so Bayou is unexpectedly granted a day off from his studies. He is elated.
Oh, to be a teenager with no responsibilities?
Right. And his first instinct is to visit Dayu.
But he doesn't get to see her.
No. When he arrives at her courtyard, her maids intercept him. They inform him that Dayu only ate half a bowl of porridge, is exhausted, and is currently taking a nap.
So they tell him to buzz off.
Exactly. They say he should leave her be. Rebuffed, Bayou begins wandering aimlessly through the massive labyrinth of the family garden.
Just killing time.
Just killing time. His wandering eventually leads him to his cousin Zishun's quarters, where he accidentally eavesdrops on a game of Go.
And this isn't just a casual, friendly game to pass the time. Shichun is playing against Miaoyu, the enigmatic nun who lives in the garden's convent.
Right.
Baoyu listens at the window, and he hears them intensely debating a highly specific Go tactic called inverted boots, or daotaksu. Now, I am not a Go expert, but looking at the mechanics of this move, the fact that Miaoyu is playing it is incredibly telling.
Oh, absolutely. The mechanics of inverted boots are ruthless.
Explain it for someone who's never played.
So in Go, the goal is to encircle territory and capture your opponent's stones. Datoaksu is an advanced, highly aggressive strategy where a player intentionally sacrifices a cluster of their own stones.
Oh, they let themselves get captured.
Yes, deliberately allowing them to be captured and removed from the board by the opponent.
Which seems counterintuitive.
To a novice, it looks like a blunder, but this intentional death creates a specific geometric shape in the newly empty space on the board, allowing the player to immediately strike back, place a new stone inside the opponent's territory, and capture an even larger, devastating amount of the opponent's pieces.
That is wow.
It requires profound deception, cold calculation, and the absolute willingness to incur a deliberate, painful loss to execute a fatal counterattack.
Which makes the visual of Miao Yu, this supposedly serene, detached nun who has renounced all worldly desires and conflict, gleefully executing a move built on deception and slaughter, absolutely hilarious.
It's so deeply ironic.
Bao Yu is watching this unfold, and he simply cannot contain himself. He bursts out laughing, startling both women, and walks into the room.
Yeah, he just barges in.
And then he attempts to flirt with Miao Yu. Or rather, he tries to compliment her using that specific, overly intellectual, slightly pretentious tone that teenage boys adopt when they're trying to impress someone they think is profound.
We all know that tone.
Right. He says, well, of course you're brilliant at chess. A monk's quiet mind makes them spiritually intelligent.
And Miao Yu's physical reaction shatters her carefully constructed persona.
Completely.
The text explicitly notes that she blushes deeply and lowers her head in embarrassment and pleasure.
The nun is blushing.
Yes, she goes to great lengths to present herself as someone who has transcended the mortal world, someone completely immune to the messy, petty emotions of the people in the garden.
But it's totally an act.
Clearly, she is entirely invested in a ruthless game of territorial conquest, and she blushes furiously the moment a handsome young man pays her a compliment.
It is the ultimate comedy of misunderstanding layered over spiritual pretense. And it peaks with the very next interaction.
Right, because Miao Yu tries to recover.
Yeah, she's trying desperately to recover her composure and reassert her identity as the spiritual authority in the room. So she looks at Bao Yu and asks him what seems like a simple question. Where do you come from?
But in the context of Zen Buddhism, where do you come from is rarely a simple question.
Oh, really?
It is often deployed as a koan or jifeng, a deep, seemingly unanswerable philosophical riddle designed by a master to provoke sudden enlightenment in a student.
Oh.
Yeah, it is a challenge to articulate one's fundamental existence, spiritual origin, and understanding of the void.
So Bao Yu, hearing this from the resident nun, absolutely panics. He goes completely red in the face.
He's terrified.
He assumes she is testing his spiritual depth with a profound riddle, and his brain just completely short-circuits. He stands there, sweating, completely mute, unable to formulate an answer about his spiritual origins.
It's so painful to imagine.
And then Shichun, who has been quietly watching this entire train wreck of an interaction, just starts laughing.
She pops the bubble.
She does. She looks at Bao Yu and says, "What is wrong with you?" She's just asking from which building in the garden you walked over here.
Shichun's intervention punctures the pretension instantly.
Right.
But the brilliance of the scene is the double backfire.
Yeah, because Miao Yu gets caught too.
When Shichun points out that it was just a mundane logistical question, Miao Yu suddenly realizes how incredibly awkward and intense she made it sound.
Yeah.
So she starts blushing profusely all over again, entirely humiliated by her own perceived pretense, before literally fleeing the room to escape the embarrassment.
Okay, I have to push back on the assumptions here, though. Was Miao Yu actually trying to ask a deep philosophical question and then got saved by Shichun's literal interpretation? Or was Bao Yu just completely overthinking a normal conversation?
That's the big question.
Because looking at the text, it feels like two people who both desperately want to sound incredibly smart, completely short-circuiting each other's ability to communicate.
And the genius of the writing is that it works precisely because they are both trapped in their own projected personas.
Oh, interesting.
It is highly likely Miao Yu was asking a mundane question, but because she constantly cloaks herself in the aesthetic and cadence of a Zen master, her everyday speech sounds like a spiritual interrogation.
So Bao Yu naturally assumes it's a test.
Right. Bao Yu, conversely, idolizes the purity and detachment he thinks she represents. He assumes everything she says must be layered with profound meaning.
They're just talking past each other.
Exactly. Miao Yu wants to be seen as an enlightened master. Bao Yu wants to be seen as a worthy intellectual disciple. Neither of them is actually communicating with the vulnerable, awkward human being standing right in front of them.
It's painful to read, but so incredibly human.
Very human.
So Bao Yu, trying to salvage the situation and act like a gentleman, escorts Miao Yu out of Shichun's courtyard. They are walking back through the garden, enduring what we can only assume is a suffocatingly awkward silence.
Oh, I'm sure it was unbearable.
When they are interrupted by a sound. And this sound takes the narrative and violently yanks the tone from a teenage romantic comedy straight into impending horror.
Yeah, the tone shift is abrupt. As they traverse the garden path, they hear the distinct, resonant, lingering sound of the kin.
Dai Yu's playing.
Right. Miao Yu immediately halts. She stops Bayu and dictates a strict rule of engagement. One must only ever listen to the kin, never look at it.
Why is that?
Well, the belief is that to visually observe the player playing alters the purity of receiving the music, making it a performance rather than an expression of the soul.
Ah, okay.
So, adhering to this aesthetic rule, they hide themselves behind a large garden rock to eavesdrop.
And what they hear is Dayu. She is playing the music she meticulously composed earlier, matching Bao Chai's sorrowful poetry about hidden fish and autumn winds to those ancient melodies. She sings 4 stanzas pouring out her deep homesickness, her physical isolation, and her utter lack of freedom.
And here, hidden behind the rock, we see Miao Yu transition back from an awkward, blushing girl into an extraordinarily brilliant musical analyst.
Because she really knows her stuff.
She does. She listens to the first 2 stanzas and immediately correctly identifies the complex rhyme schemes Dayu is employing.
Wow.
She notes the shift from the kin rhyme to the yang rhyme. She's deeply mathematically attuned to the structural and emotional architecture of the music.
So she isn't just hearing a sad song.
No, she is reading the emotional source code Dayu is writing.
But then Dayu reaches the final stanza. She sings the line, "Life is like light dust," and the text explicitly states that Miao Yu is shocked pale.
Yeah, she literally loses color.
The translation of the reaction is a physical loss of color from her face. So why does that specific philosophical line break the composure of someone who just spent the afternoon executing inverted boots on a go board?
Well, it isn't just the lyrical content, it is the tonal shift.
Okay, what happens in the music?
Miao Yu identifies that at the exact moment Dayu sings "Life is like light dust," the music dramatically shifts into what is called a bianzi tone.
A bianzi tone.
Yes. To understand why this is terrifying, we have to look at traditional Chinese music theory. The standard pentatonic scale consists of 5 notes: gong, sheng, ji, and yu.
Okay.
These notes are traditionally associated with balance, natural elements, and societal harmony. A bianzi tone introduces a changing or altered ji note, creating a semitone that disrupts the harmony.
It throws everything off.
Exactly. In classical literature and musicology, the bianzi tone is historically associated with extreme sorrow, tragic farewells, and the grief of the doomed.
Oh.
It produces a sound so piercing, dissonant, and desolate that ancient texts claim it possesses the power to crack metal and stone.
Crack metal and stone. That is intense.
So Miao Yu recognizes the absolute, unadulterated despair pouring out of Dayu's fingers. She turns to Bayu and warns him that the music is too much, stating flatly that a physical body channeling that level of raw, destructive grief cannot last long.
It is a chilling prognosis. She is basically diagnosing Dayu with terminal heartbreak just by analyzing a chord progression.
That's exactly what she's doing.
And then comes the absolute climax of the scene. Right as Miao Yu and Bayu are whispering behind the rock about how the music cannot possibly sustain this level of sorrow, there is a loud, violent crack from inside the pavilion.
It's a terrifying moment.
The jun string on Dayu's zither abruptly snaps.
And the snapping of the jun string is profoundly significant.
It's not just a broken string.
Not at all. The strings of the kin are not arbitrary. They correspond to the pentatonic scale, with the jun string representing the ruler or the lord. A snapped silk string on a zither is never interpreted merely as an issue of humidity or poor instrument maintenance. In this cultural and literary context, it is a massive, undeniable cosmic omen.
What does it symbolize?
It symbolizes a violently severed connection, the definitive end of a profound friendship or romance, a literal breaking of the heart, or a direct omen of impending death.
And Miao Yu's reaction to this omen is incredible. She hears that string snap, she immediately stands up from behind the rock, and she just leaves.
She's out of there.
She looks at Bayu, delivers the incredibly ominous line, "You will know in the future," and walks away.
Right.
She hears the cosmic signal of doom and decides she wants absolutely no part of the fallout. On the surface, it is terrifyingly cold.
It certainly appears cold, yeah. It looks like a return to her detached nun persona. But if we evaluate this within the psychological framework of her character, that cool, detached exit is entirely a defense mechanism.
She's running away.
She isn't walking away because she is unaffected. She is fleeing because she is profoundly overwhelmed.
By everything that happened that day.
Exactly. The emotional turbulence of that entire day has compounded. You have Bayu's awkward flirting, triggering her vanity, the humiliation of the misunderstood koan, the overwhelming contagious tragedy of Dayu's music, and finally, the terrifying omen of the snapped string.
It's just too much.
It is a sensory and emotional overload, and she carries all of that chaotic energy back home with her.
Which leads us directly into the darkest, most disturbing sequence in the entire stack of sources. Miao Yu returns to the isolation of her convent. She tries to do what she always does to cope with the world. She reads her Zen texts, lights her incense, and forces herself to sit in meditation. She is actively trying to push down and suffocate everything she just felt. But then, the outside world intrudes again. Outside her window, 2 cats start violently fighting and howling. And based on the context, this is a mating dispute, correct?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
The visceral, primal, unapologetically biological sounds of the cats fighting and mating violently pierce through her forced silence.
It's like the real world crashing in.
Exactly. The sound acts as a massive psychological trigger. It forcefully reminds her of the physical world, of Bayou's presence earlier that day, his clumsy flirting, and the very real, very human earthly desires she is desperately trying to starve out of her own body.
The physiological reaction is immediate. Her heart starts racing. She tries to force her mind back into the emptiness of meditation, but the text describes her mind beginning to race like 10,000 horses.
She's losing control.
The physical architecture of the room around her starts to warp. She feels her meditation bed swaying beneath her, and then the dam breaks. She goes into a full-blown hallucinatory psychosis.
It's terrifying to read, and the specific content of her hallucinations is intensely revealing of her suppressed psyche.
Because she's not just seeing random things.
No, she doesn't hallucinate abstract demons. She hallucinates the exact social pressures she is hiding from.
Right.
First, she imagines noblemen breaking into the convent, aggressively demanding to marry her.
Wow.
Then she sees matchmakers physically dragging her toward waiting carriages.
All this pressure to conform.
Yes. And finally, the vision devolves into pure terror. She hallucinates violent bandits attacking her with knives and clubs.
That is horrifying.
The physical manifestation is horrifying, too. She begins screaming, foaming at the mouth, her eyes roll back into her head, and her cheeks flush bright red.
Oh my God.
She is yelling into the empty room that she has the Bodhisattva's protection, weeping and crying out for her mother.
It is an absolutely harrowing description of a mental break. The doctors are rushed in, the other nuns are panicking. What exactly is the historical and medical framework for what is happening to her in this text?
What Miao Yu experience is a classic, terrifying depiction of a phenomenon known historically as zuo-rumo, which translates roughly to catching fire and entering the demonic path.
Catching fire and entering the demonic path.
In modern psychological or spiritual terms,
Okay.
it's often referred to as key deviation, meditation sickness, or meditation-induced psychosis.
Okay.
We must look at the mechanics of why this happens to her. True meditation requires a natural settling of the mind, a letting go. Miao Yu is doing the exact opposite.
She's forcing it.
She is attempting to violently suppress her very human, very natural earthly desires with rigid, forced spiritual practice. She isn't naturally enlightened. She is white-knuckling her abstinence.
And you can only hold on so tight for so long.
Exactly. When the human mind is forced to repress its fundamental nature so aggressively and is then suddenly bombarded with powerful sensory triggers like Baoyu's attention and the primal sound of the mating cats, the psyche recoils.
Right.
The forced structure collapses and her reality fractures completely.
The pressure cooker explodes because she screwed the lid on too tight.
That's a great way to put it.
And what makes this so tragic is how the people around her and the society at large react.
It's appalling.
Her own servants are running around the courtyard, blindly blaming bad yin energy radiating from the southwest corner of the garden. A doctor eventually arrives, takes her pulse, confirms the diagnosis of entering the demonic path, but notes she can likely be saved with specific heart-fire calming medicine, primarily because she hadn't been trapped meditating in that dangerous fractured state for too long before they found her.
But the physical and medical recovery is only half the tragedy.
Right, because everyone finds out.
The true devastation is the social fallout. News of her psychotic break, and more specifically, the deeply personal, vulnerable content of her hallucinations, screaming about marriage, matchmakers, and men with knives leaks out of the convent walls and into the broader household.
And the rumors that spread are just vicious.
Beyond vicious.
People in the broader society hear about her collapse, and they show absolutely zero compassion for a young woman going through a terrifying medical event. They immediately start gossiping.
Of course they do.
They say she was always too young, too romantic, and too clever to successfully suppress her lust. They practically gloat over her failure, wondering aloud, and the text specifically notes this, who she will eventually fall into the hands of. It is sickening to read.
It is the ultimate punishment mechanism of the Fishbowl Society. They demand absolute, unattainable purity and spiritual perfection from her because she wears the robes of a nun.
But no one can actually live up to that?
No one. But the very moment the impossible strain of that forced perfection breaks her mind, they immediately pivot to tearing her apart.
Right.
They view her psychological collapse not as a tragedy worthy of empathy, but as inevitable, satisfying proof of her hypocrisy. The society that forced her into the pressure cooker is the same society that cheers when it explodes.
It is a lose-lose situation. She is trying so hard to rise above the muck of the world, to be perfect, and they punish her for having a human breaking point by reducing her entirely to her suppressed sexuality.
It's incredibly cruel.
But while Miaoyu is broken by her inability to truly detach from the world, there is someone else watching this entire event unfold who draws a chillingly different conclusion about how to survive.
Shichu.
Yes, Shichun. Remember, Shichun is the younger cousin who is playing Go with Miaoyu earlier in the day, the one who casually laughed at Baiyu's awkwardness and Miaoyu's blushing.
Right.
Shichun receives the news of Miaoyu's terrifying breakdown from her maid, Keiping. Keiping comes running into the room, breathlessly gossiping about Miaoyu, babbling about bandits, foaming at the mouth, and going completely mad.
And Shichun's reaction is what truly terrifies me. And
Me too.
she hears that her friend, the person she was just strategizing over a board game with hours ago, has lost her mind.
Mm.
And Shichun exhibits absolutely no empathy.
Nothing.
She doesn't express worry. She doesn't ask what the doctor prescribed or if Miaoyu is safe. Instead, she sits silently and coldly deduces that Miaoyu's problem was simply a failure of execution.
Failure execution.
Yeah, that her mortal ties were not severed.
Oh my God.
Shichun effectively uses her friend's psychological break as an abstract case study to prove her own superior worldview.
That is so dark.
It really is. Shichun thinks to herself that if she were to become a nun and enter the ascetic life, she would experience no demonic disturbances, no key deviation, and no hallucinations.
Why? Why would she be immune?
Because her mind would be truly, completely dead to the world. She articulates this state of being as one thought not born, 10,000 ties silence.
So she just wants to feel absolutely nothing.
She believes that the only way to avoid Miaoyu's fate is to eradicate the capacity for feeling altogether.
And to cement this terrifying epiphany, Shichun actually composes a Buddhist gatha, a philosophical poem that crystallizes her worldview. She writes, "Creation has no set direction, where should one dwell? Since one comes from the void, one should return to the void."
From the void to the void.
Oh.
In isolation, it sounds like a profound expression of enlightened detachment.
That sounds very wise.
But placed in the context of her friend's ongoing psychotic break just across the garden, it is an expression of absolute, terrifying ice.
It really is.
And her actions immediately following the composition of the poem confirm this. Having solved the philosophical problem of human suffering by deciding to feel nothing, she goes right back to her desk and resumes reading her Go manuals.
She specifically starts studying a highly aggressive Go strategy called 8 Dragons Running Horses, completely and utterly unfazed by the chaos and tragedy that has just engulfed her friend. I have to ask, looking at the psychological profiles here, she watches her friend's mind shatter under the weight of the world, and her takeaway is essentially, that wouldn't happen to me because my heart is already dead.
From a purely clinical standpoint, within the survival mechanics of the narrative, Shichun achieves what Miaoyu could not. Shichun is actually capable of cutting off human empathy and viewing the world and the people in it as an abstract game of black and white stones.
Oh.
But the text frames this not as a glorious spiritual triumph, but as a chilling ultimate defense mechanism. The fishbowl society they live in is so toxic, the emotional demands so impossible, and the lack of agency so absolute, that Shichun realizes the only way to survive without breaking like Daiyu or hallucinating like Miaoyu is to preemptively kill her own heart.
She chooses the void.
It chooses the void because the void cannot be hurt, cannot be disappointed, and cannot be betrayed.